And we're back. Hi,
Are
my
we?
name is Steve. Yes, we are.
Okay, good. I'm Ian.
And we've been talking about needs in Downbelow. This is a general meta-story situation here. We'll be delving into some specific stories soon, but for now we've actually got more setting story to talk about. Last time we talked about the gravity well of the baseline existence, and this time we're going to be talking about the effect of the literal gravity well on existence.
So, in the world of Downbelow, we've touched on this a while back in one of our long discussions, and maybe a little bit in our short discussions, but the resources that make the utopian aspect of society possible came into play when large-scale asteroid and comet resource reclamation started really boosting the economy when the space industry took off wildly with the space elevators.
In other words, the space industry became an industry when people could actually easily get to space thanks to the elevators. And this also led the ability of goods to flow from space back to Earth. So, while we haven't got, say, fossil fuels, there are large deposits of helium-3 that have been found in asteroids. There are plenty of minerals that have been brought down the gravity well from space that were never possible before.
And a heck of a lot of water ice that has been used for space fuel that has continued to fuel the growth of the space industry itself.
Absolutely.
So, the thing about the space industry in the world of Downbelow, like in the world today, although the percentages are a little bit higher for the number of people who actually get to live and work in space. Like, nowadays there are very, very, very few people who live in space.
So much less than 1%, you'd have too many zeros on the
There's
page.
a few people on the International Space Station, and that's it. A highly elite group. The people who work in space are slightly larger. The
people who support the people working in space are slightly larger than that.
But we're still talking a minuscule amount of the Earth's population.
Less than an 18th of a percent.
In the world of Downbelow, we're talking more on the order of 10% of the population living and working in space, and more like 20% supporting it. But the fact of the matter is that the people who live in space, or live in the space elevators, or at the base of the space elevators, represent a disproportionately wealthy portion of the population in this world. There is effectively a gravity well for money that gravitates towards space, and the actual gravity well of the planets, which is primarily Earth, although we'll talk about the colonies later, because those have a little bit of a role in the setting. The actual gravity well of Earth keeps most of humanity rooted on the planet and tends to drag them away from the wealth towards that subsistence level that is being provided for.
One of the simplest reasons that even the basic workers supporting the space program directly are better paid is that for them there is not only more work to do, but that work is fairly specialized. You can't just come out of college and go straight into the space program, even if it's just hauling goods. You need training and certification that the right goods are going to the right place, and that means that while there's more work directly to be filled, there are fewer qualified bodies to fill it, therefore
Indeed.
putting more money in those few hands.
And there is, for the most part, a huge amount of automation going on in the space industry, which means that the people who do fill jobs for it are one of three types. There's the people who were owners to begin with, and so they've made things for themselves to do.
Mm-hmm.
There's the people who have training in the technical math and science and engineering fields that are needed to maintain the automation and search out new sources of resources in space. And then there's the people who manage to use similar technical and or business knowledge, again, very heavily focused in math, to create their own opportunities, go entrepreneur. And I would have to say that of the people who make it in the space industry, you're looking at over half in that middle category, with outliers at either of the other two.
Again, because no matter how many people are involved in the business, no matter how many people are involved in the automation, there are still people who need to oversee and program the automation, and there are people who need to be those pilots and who need to be those hard laborers. When you just can't trust automation to get it there in time, you need someone to just move that pallet.
So, that might not be exactly the metaphor, but there are still places in the industry where human intervention is needed, human creativity and human understanding are needed. The limitations of artificial intelligence still, to a great extent, resemble what they are today, because although computers can be trained to do a great many things, it is still humans who have the desires and the actual decision-making to do of what needs to be targeted.
Right. So, while the mass of humanity is stuck down the gravity well, the mass of resources is constantly flowing up the gravity well.
Although the resources actually come from up the gravity well in the first place, the tendency is for all of the credit, all of the capital to accumulate at the point where those resources are being brought in, and for only a limited quantity of it to actually trickle down the gravity well. The subsistence economy that has been mandated for most citizens in Downbelow is a literal trickle-down economics that has been made to work by mandate, but much like the concept which fails to work in modern economics, has some fundamental flaws.
What does this mean for your characters? Well, this actually means for your characters that if you are playing the rich or the hyper-rich, there's not going to be much interesting things for you to do. You might find some interest in pushing the frontiers of business. You might find some interest in pushing the frontiers of science. There's definitely a space for exploring campaigns, but it's really not a Downbelow campaign at that point.
And we'll go more into the opportunities...
Excuse me.
And...
Pardon.
Well, we're going to close it on that note.